Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
So, okay, well then that brings us to my item, the third and final item on today's podcast. Everybody's still continuing to go berserk over ChatGPT and all the use cases, and there have been dozens of posts about how you can apply it to marketing and SEO and local SEO and what you can do, keyword discovery, and blah 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 blah. And we'll be tackling those kinds of issues in a subsequent podcast. But the news today yesterday was that Microsoft was going to be integrating ChatGPT capabilities into Bing somehow as a competitive move against Google. And I heard from Neva via an email that they're doing something similar. I guess that their CEO did a podcast interview in which he talked about that conceptually, but I didn't hear that. So I heard, Neva emailed me and said that today. So it seems like, and then Google also rolled out Google's unit DeepMind is rolled out a large language model for healthcare, medical Q&A. And so that's a very specialized vertical use case. So it seems that this is an inevitability, that these kinds of AI chat mechanisms are making their way into search broadly defined. And we will see some integration into search, which is kind of fascinating to think about and has implications for the business model because, you can't stuff as many ads into you could put an ad
or any,
right. You could theoretically put a contextual ad at the bottom of a, response page or something. But yes, right. So right now it's pretty disruptive of the ad model if they go in that direction. So
I can see how this works in a limited domain, let's say healthcare, heart conditions. But I still am confused how it's going to work in an open conversational domain where hallucination, which is the technical term for it, just making up an answer, how that's going to be prevented and or moderated. I asked it to write me a email letter pitching an AI-based pen this morning, and it wrote a great letter, and it just pulled stuff from whole cloth. Let's see. The pen is able to suggest synonyms and alternative phrases as you write, helping you to expand your vocabulary and make your writing more engaging. I mean, where did it come up with this stuff? It doesn't have any sense of irony, I don't think, although this would be a great piece if it did. So how do you prevent that from sneaking into search results if it's a broad-based chatbot? Again, if it were limited domain, I can see how it could be done.
And I don't know the answer. I mean, I think that's a very hard problem. The other thing that we've talked about in the past, I think, is that you don't know the source of the information. So there's this idea that, how do I know, this is a sort of a related issue to yours, Mike, is like, how do I know that this is trustworthy information?
But that's not all. The pen also has a built-in thesaurus and dictionary. Exactly. How do you know it's reliable? I mean,
that's an obvious case where it's ridiculous because such a thing can't exist, at least at this moment in history. But there are other cases where you're asking questions about history or questions about advice that might sound quite plausible given the sophistication of the writing, but are completely false or completely incorrect. I mean, what about like tax related questions, right? People are always asking during, it's tax time and can I deduct this, or what's the rule, or when are the deadlines? How are you going to know if any of that information is accurate?
Right. Yeah. In a limited world like HTML or title tags for websites, writing a little bit of regex, I can see those as really valuable things, even if it gets it wrong, because it gets you closer to a right answer. But in the broad scheme of the world, I see real problems still to be dealt with here.
The ChatGPT has a disclaimer, and they'll have to put a disclaimer on anything, sort of search related. This is, don't rely on this.
This is your content. You own the copyright to it, Mr. Searcher. We are taking no responsibility for this output.
Here's the NDA. Sign the NDA, or not the NDA, the waiver of liability.
That's right.
But so I will say it's one potentially saving grace, I would say, is that at least in ChatGPT's case, it doesn't even try to answer a number of what I would say are real-time search queries where I was asking, what's the score of the Blazers game? And it just didn't even try. It just said, I can't do this. And so in cases of critical sort of in the moment information, it may just say, hey, you need to go use traditional Bing or whatever. So,
well, but it will extend to the open internet. I mean, eventually you're going to get, I mean, they have a small data set that they've trained it on, and eventually it's going to be the internet, I think in real time, but we'll see. But,
I mean, Google has the interesting advantage of having one of the world's largest knowledge graphs. And this is structured data that has a relationship and a certain trustworthiness to it. I mean, it's not completely trustworthy, but it seems to me that if you could integrate it with that, you might be able to limit the inputs and the outputs to something that you have some trust in.
Well, interestingly, along those lines, it might be well suited to local information.
Exactly,
because we know the local knowledge graph is completely infallible.
Well, that's not true.
But at least we know the source of it, and we know that we won't be able to affect the source of it, and then we can't complain about it, but we can file some report that goes who knows where. We do know.
The interesting thing to me about this is that I mean, you were talking in another context, not on this recording, about the appeal of the UI, the ChatGPT UI.
Right.
There's a sort of an ironic analogy to Google. I mean, one of the things that people loved about Google in the earliest stage of its development was how simple it was. You plug in a question or some set of, query string, and you got information. Even though it might have been 10 blue links, it was really magical to people at that time. And this is kind of a similar thing where you've got a very simple UI, a single box, and you're getting these coherent responses that are free of all the Las Vegas, Main Street Electrical Parade images and links and other, pull downs and all this
Greg,
stuff.
you have the perfect word for that. You gotta use your own word, the Baroque SERP. I love it.
Yes, the Baroque SERP, exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that these things have value in certain contexts, but I think people are responding to the simplicity of ChatGPT. And I think that that's partly what's driving the frenzy. It's like, wow, I can just do something. I can put anything in and I'm getting, information back. Now, whether it's accurate or not is another question. Similar to what's going on with generative AI, you can just plug in a string of words and you get an image. I mean, it's magical, truly.
I would like to note that overall, the AI-powered pen is a game-changing tool that is sure to revolutionize the way you write.
Well, how much is that going to retail for, Mike?
I would be happy to provide you with more information or answer any questions you may have. Thank you for considering this exciting product.
Well, what's yeah? It sounds like there should be an 800 number to call or a where you can buy.
I only asked for an email pitching the AI-based pen. I didn't ask for an ad, so we'll have to go back to the well and see how it does.
But it is kind of remarkable how quickly this has taken off. I mean, it's really only a month or a month and a half or something. I don't know when this first became public. And
it's not even that long. It's 3 weeks, whatever.
Yeah, and people have just gone berserk with this and are genuinely excited about it, and people are already using it in practical ways, amazingly.
Yeah. And a related note, remember we talked, I don't know when it was, 6 months ago, about the man who submitted his photos to the doctor and got banned by Google because their AI tagged him as a child molester. Well, there was a follow-up article in the New York Times about a woman who had a similar problem, but Google subsequently revised their appeal process and she was able to get her account back. I mean, part of the problem with AI is that we don't have the social structures to cope with the input or the output or the results of the decisions. And it really requires a rethinking of sort of how we put the data in, how we get it out, how we vet what comes out, and then what we do after that. I mean, and the problem is there's this general love affair. I was at sort of a meet and greet a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about how much they loved AI. And I said, hold it, wait a minute. I mean, there are some limits to this technology that society really hasn't coped with yet. And it's dangerous, even though it's exciting, and I'm excited by it. And I use ChatGPT on a regular basis, if for nothing else than to write
for amusement.
But
entertainment.
Still, there are some severe and deep implications to just accepting this technology in our lives. I mean, think of it in the hands of police departments with facial recognition. And all
right.
that.
Absolutely. I mean, there are all kinds of well-documented ethical issues with AI systems.
And very little discussion of that in the context of ChatGPT.
Well, there's little discussion of it in our world. There's a lot of discussion going on, our world being the world of digital marketers and marketing. Nobody's really talking about ethical issues or bias or errors or whatever they're talking about. I mean, some people are saying you can't use it for this or that, but they're talking about all the kind of cool cost-saving applications and creativity assisting use cases. But there is a lot of discussion about AI ethics going on. It's just in the world of academia and certain quarters that are not really penetrating. I mean, Google talks about it too. They've had controversy about their internal personnel, but we don't need to get into that around ethical AI issues.
Well, it seems entirely appropriate to me that they do have some breaks on releasing this stuff.
But it's interesting because the market is sort of racing forward, and Google, the article in the New York Times said that Google had declared a code red because they saw this as a disruptive technology for them.
Yeah.
So there's something happening that's gonna happen. It's not just a kind of a toy, as Kevin Indig says, he's not taking that position, but that's tool or toy. There's definitely something that's going to happen here to search. And it feels like the ground is shifting now a little bit where it hasn't for the last maybe decade. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how far it can go and be productive addition to our lives as opposed to the less appealing aspects like my pen pitch.
Well, I mean, I had this roofing problem that I've talked to you guys about a bunch. It's been raining a lot in California, and it's supposed to. I'm in my seafaring garb because it's supposed to be a massive storm hitting us today, atmospheric river and all. And we had some roof problems, and I would have loved. I mean, I had a roofer who came back and did a fix, but I would love in that situation just to be able to say best roofer, best fill in the blank practitioner, location, and get 3 names or 1 name and have confidence in that, because I don't need to spend 3 hours going through reviews and all of that. I just really want to get the information, and that's what word of mouth used to be. So that's the promise of something like this, is it can sift through all the noise that the SERP represents now and give us something more precise and more targeted. But as you say, there's a long way to go before we can get there.
Best regards, Mike Blumenthal.
Why don't we read the whole thing again verbatim? No, don't do it, Mike. Don't do it. I'm just kidding. You can.
I almost snuck in that crack. You don't give me a crack because I'll.
You can concoct a whole bunch of new futuristic products, and we can read 1 a week on this podcast. All right.
I only gave you the highlights of the letter. If anybody would like it, I will be glad to email it to you.
Send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Mike Blumenthal. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. I hope everybody had a great holiday. Welcome back. And we're excited to be doing another year of Near Media, Near Memo, and some other stuff, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about soon.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.